Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 20th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their territory upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item tonight is the adoption of the minutes of the Council meeting held July 6, 2015. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? Being none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The second item is the adoption of the minutes of the Special Council meeting held July the 9th, 2015. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Oates, Councillor Salter seconds it. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is also carried. And next, we have the minutes of the Special Council meeting held July 13th, 2015. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Greer. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Before I ask for an approval of tonight's agenda, unfortunately, the delegation that was supposed to appear in the person of Mr. John Olson is not able to attend tonight, so I would make that amendment to tonight's presentation. Omitting the delegation, we'll move right on to reports. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Salter. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Well, I have a very pleasant duty to do tonight, and it's the recognition of volunteer service by Beverly McLeod. Beverly McLeod of the Welcome Wagon programs recognized 28 years of volunteer service in the Parksville community. And Ms. McLeod, I don't know if you remember, but you came to my house when I first arrived in Parksville 18 years ago. I remember it very well. If you want to come forward. Okay. So moving on, we're going to skip the delegation, as we mentioned earlier. And we have, first item on the agenda is Chief Banks, the Parksville Volunteer Fire Department year-to-date statistics. Chief Banks, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just thought I'd update Council on what the fire department's been up to in the first 6 months of this year. It's been a while since we've had the opportunity to do that. So to date this year, we are slightly above this time last year, the 2014 numbers. This is a sort of a breakdown of the calls we have. The first column here in the red is alarms calls. That's for residential alarms, commercial alarms, and that. And I'm happy to report that these are actually down from the previous year. Traditionally, alarms have been one of the biggest portions of our call volume. So we dropped down from 48 calls at this time in 2014 down to 34 in 2015. The yellow column is brush fires, bark mulch. I just kind of lumped a few together. They're actually up a little bit. The biggest jump in these is because bark mulch is my pet peeve. We've been keeping track of how many bark mulch fires that we've had, and with the recent weather and that, we've had a number of bark mulch fires. Majority of cases, I can usually find a cigarette butt in the middle of where the fire started. So we'd just like to urge people to take care when they're disposing of their cigarettes. Chimney fires, we track the blue column here is burning complaints and that we're on about par for that. We get a lot of calls for people that may not be aware of the regulations, and they're having a fire of some kind, so we go and take the opportunity to use it as education and explain the regulations and put them out. The rest of these are fairly standard, fuel spills, gas leaks, and that sort of thing. The trend is about the same. The bluey green column here is our medical calls. This is one area that has jumped about 100% over the year before. We're about 47 medical calls this year compared to 21 at this time last year. Our department provides first responder services when we go out to echo calls, which is cardiac arrest and that, or if the ambulance needs a lift. Last week or the week before, we were asked to come out and give them a lift with a person that was heavy with the 2 ambulance attendants. It was just a recipe for a back injury to try and lift this person. So we'll go out and assist them when they need it. And we also respond when the ambulance is delayed. I don't have the breakdown with me right now of how many of the delayed calls that we get, but there's a number of times when there are no ambulances available in the area. They're all committed and on calls, so we will get called out and stabilize the patient until they arrive. I know they have, for example, I haven't talked to them recently, but a couple years ago we were having discussions with them, and the ambulance that's stationed in Cumberland, I believe 30% of their calls at the time were in this area here. I know our cars they get down to Nanaimo. If they take a patient down there, they have to wait to turn the patient over to the hospital in emergency, so they can be there a while if emergency is busy. And if Nanaimo gets busy, being a provincial service, they get sent wherever is required. So a lot of the calls that the 2 cars that are stationed in Parks will do are actually done in Nanaimo and that. So that's one area that we're monitoring and seeing how that goes. So. Then motor vehicle incidents, the purple column, we get a number of those. That's fairly stable. And a lot of those cases, we don't page out the full crew for motor vehicle incident. Most cases around town here, it's a fender bender sort of thing. So we just go out and have a look at it and make sure the scene's safe. And if we have to clean up any spills, we do so. And they're about the same as 2014 levels. In fact, they're identical for this time last year. So the red is sort of public service. That's kind of the catch-all for the ones that we go deal with. So that's about constant. The green column here is structure fires on the on the right there. That's structure fires. we've dealt with about 12 structure fires this year. The change that I have from this year from last is I used to have the automatic aid calls and mutual aid calls that we go to outside of Parksville area. I had them separate, but right now we have them lumped in here with either the alarms or the structure fires. So we've had a couple structure fires where we go out and assist the other areas. They might be a structure fire, they might be alarms, so we've just put them all in there. So, and vehicle fires are actually down. So in total, for the first half of the year, we've responded and dealt with 191 incidents compared to 172 in 2014. So it's starting to go back up. We were on a downward cycle for a little bit as far as calls go, and it's starting to kind of go back up a little bit. Just a interesting thing, there's a lot of numbers on the bottom there, but this is the calls by hour, number of calls. So our busiest time is between 11 and noon during the day. You can see the purple column here. That's 9 o'clock in the morning. From 9 till about 3 or 4 is probably our busiest time, surprisingly. So fortunately, the early hours of the morning were not all that busy, because I know everybody likes to sleep through the night, but you know, it gets busier, and then around dinner time and stuff like that, we get a little bit busier. Then it tapers off again in the late evening. So this is one of the reports that we got with our new records management system we switched over to. It does all this good, interesting stuff. You can see where the time and that is. So training is a big. This one's a little hard to see. I just threw this in there at the last minute. Training takes up a big portion of our time, more so than emergency incidents. So for this year to date, our training hours will be up a little bit, because in 2014 we didn't have a recruit class. So our hours are up a little bit. But for the first half of the year, we put in about 3,500 hours into training, over 105 different sessions. So it's quite busy. If you're by the hall this weekend, we had our recruit class was in there working on Module 2, and we've started doing some joint training with other fire departments in the area. So we had members from Lanceville Fire Department and from Dashwood down sitting in on the same training that our people were taking. And the deputy chief from Dashwood was actually down on Saturday helping do some of the training as well. So we're sharing some of the resources regionally for the training and that. So that's just a sort of a quick update on sort of what the fire department's been up to the first half of the year. So.
Thank you, Chief. Just before I ask questions from council, I don't want to forget this, so I'll do it now. At a board meeting this last Tuesday night, or last Tuesday night at the RDN, the alternate for Director Fell, Director McLean, wanted me to bring back to council. I think I sent council and the staff an email how grateful that they were for the participation of all of the fire departments in the area, the Parksville Fire Department, for the work that they did in that area with the brush fire. I gather, Chief Banks, if the response hadn't been so quick, and by the number of fire departments that did arrive on scene, the fire could have been quite serious. And he wanted me to make sure that we thanked everybody that was involved. So I'm doing this. I did it in email, and I'm doing it publicly tonight. I think that he was very, very effusive in his praise for the work that the fire department did.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I did pass your comments on to the crew already, and that was a good example of probably leading into my next report. we had, I think there was 5 fire departments there and about 50 firefighters, and it was about 2,000 or 3,000 feet down the track, so you had to carry hose in, and working with forestry, getting a handle on it. We had just had a meeting the night before to talk about our response, how we're going to deal with responses like this regionally, because this is the second one that we've had in the area when we're in the extreme weather conditions. So it was a good effort by all the fire departments, and you never know, it might be our turn to have them come in one day.
Questions from council on the presentation of Councillor Powell. Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to go back to the backyard burning, or people that are burning when they shouldn't be, and they should be familiar with the bylaw. Do you ever get any repeats after you've gone to do the education piece? And if you have, are they fined, or what happens with them?
Your Worship, through you, Councillor Powell, we've had a couple repeats in the regional district area, and we've turned that over to the bylaw officer. Typically, it's people are just, unaware of the regulations. They haven't bothered to phone and see what the regulations are. We don't get a lot of repeats. We find, if we do, we're in discussions with the bylaw department and follow up with that way. So.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Chief. If you may, Your Worship, the statistics that you gave there earlier with the time of day that you get the most calls, and you said the busiest time of the day was between 11 and noon, I believe you said, something like that? That's right. But are there any specific calls that happen at that time, or is that generally, if you just took all the calls, lumped them in together, the most of them come in between 11 and noon, and they could be a variety of all the different types of calls? Is that what I'm understanding? Right. And in your experience, is that common? Is that when you usually get the calls, at lunchtime, or? Thank you, Chief.
Councillor Greer.
Thanks, Chief, for the presentation. I'm just wondering, when you have such a fire as you had out in Coombs, how do you coordinate that? How do you coordinate all the fire departments, and who's in charge on those?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, we utilize the incident command system, and we will that particular. I'll use the fire that we went to out in Coombs. It was in their area, and with our mutual aid agreements and automatic aid agreements, they are in charge of the incident. They're responsible. We've been sending out some of the chief officers from the other departments, the other departments that respond, also send somebody out to help them set up a command structure. So, we might have 3 or 4 other chief officers out there from other departments that are, that's what they do is deal with the command structure on calls day to day. So we just expand it out because a lot of the other departments, or a lot of the other members aren't really versed, as well versed in the command structure. So we go out and we assist, and the other departments fill in and use our officers and that sort of thing, and just assisting the other departments. So, but whoever area it's in, they are responsible for the incident. We're going out there to assist them, not to go out there and take over and run the show for them. So it works well.
So in every case, it does work well, and everybody is able to coordinate it.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
So it runs pretty smooth.
It runs smooth. We've talked to, like I say, the evening before we had the fire out in Coombs a couple weeks ago, we actually had a meeting with all the other chiefs in the area and forestry, and forestry, that's their forte, dealing with these type of incidents. So I think their comment was they're happy to call us because they know that we're able to deal with it. So,
Any further questions for Chief Banks at this point in time? Chief, I just have one comment to make. What's the correlation between the number of medical calls we're making and the total availability of ambulances in the Oceanside area? I've been told by some of the medical community, some of the medical community, that there are not enough ambulances in Oceanside. Is this showing as a factor, or is it more complicated than that?
I don't have the stats on sort of the correlation of the number and that. I got some anecdotal stuff, and with our demographics and that, we're going to a lot more cardiac calls and stuff like that. So, I don't have anything that I can really say, what's causing it, but it is something that has increased significantly for us. We used to do like 3 or 4 a month. Some weekends we were doing 3 or 4 first responder calls, and some we've gone to cardiac calls and they've been successful. The people are still walking around. Others, unfortunately, were not as successful.
On that note, not that there's any objection to what you're doing, but at some point in time, are we going to have a financial impact on what that might mean for the city? If we should people be looking at that so that we can hopefully someday do something about it if it's going to increase the way it's increasing. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next report is from Chief Banks. So you're not going away, are you? Okay. You're going to change seats? All right. The next item up is standby duty crew during extreme fire hazard rating, and I can tell you that I just had the occasion to drive from here to the Southern Gulf Islands on the weekend and back today, and I can tell you that there's extreme fire hazards all the way there and all the way back. It's pretty serious time. So before I ask for a mover and a seconder, Chief Banks, I'll let you make your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report was to seek Council's approval for establishing a duty crew that we can have at the station during the peak hours from 10 till 6 during extreme fire hazard conditions. As Your Worship noted, by having a quick response and getting on top of the fire sooner, you're going to have a smaller fire to deal with. When it gets to extreme, some of the fuels that typically don't burn that well are burning a lot faster. The recent fire in Coombs was a prime example. We have several areas here that in 2007, I believe, we did a community wildfire protection plan. We had that drawn up, and we have a number of areas that are identified as high or extreme hazard near residential areas and that. So the sooner we can get a jump on the fire, the better off we'll be.
Do I have a mover and a seconder for the 3 recommendations? Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Oates. Any questions from members of Council for the Chief? Councillor Oates and then Councillor Powell.
Not so much questions, Your Worship, just a couple of comments. As I was preparing to come here tonight, I was watching the news there, and just a couple of interesting statistics with respect to the wildfires. There are 225 active wildfires today in British Columbia. 77 of them are new that they started today. A total of 293,787 hectares have been burnt, and the cost to the provincial government to date is $132.9 million. I believe that the initiative that the fire chief has put before us tonight is an example of due diligence and how we could reduce that number for us. That there are going to be fires, that it's inevitable, and I think it's incumbent upon us to respond to those fires as fast as we can, and we certainly have the people that are trained and competent to do it. Let's give them the tools and the ability to get out there and respond. So I certainly support the establishment of an on-duty crew for the safety of the residents of the City of Parksville.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the CAO. When they talk about the prior year's surplus, is that in the general revenue, or is that, okay, thank you. The other thing I would like to say is I read your response from the email you sent out about the fire in Coombs, and I think that given how dry it is, you have to make an extremely fast response. And so to have these people or fire guys on duty in the fire hall and doing work in the fire hall while they're not being called out, I think is an excellent idea. And the cost is pretty minimal considering what we get, and I want to thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship, to Chief Banks. Would this be a rotating crew, and do you have enough volunteer firefighters? Because obviously we have people that work as well. So.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, the plan is to have it would be a rotating crew. We would set up a schedule for some members would be available, some wouldn't. We have some younger guys that are keen to do this. But the plan would be to rotate it around so we're not overtaxing, any one particular member. We would still have the other members on call, but this would help us get out the door, 6 minutes or so sooner than we normally would.
Follow-up. What's the current membership of the fire department?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, right now we have the 3 career staff and we have 40 volunteers. Of the 40 volunteers, 6 are new recruits that they're just going through some of the training. So we have to, until we get some more of the training into them, we're kind of limited to how much we can use them. But at a brush fire for pulling hose, they'll be able to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Any further comments or questions from council? Well, I'd just like to echo the comments that have been made around the table so far. I think this is an extremely important initiative you're taking, and I know that I'm fully supportive. We've talked about this before, and it's I can't believe with the wind that we had today how much drier things are and how serious this is becoming. It's becoming more serious every day. So congratulations on taking this initiative. Okay, I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thanks again, Chief Banks. The next item on your agenda is the land exchange portions of... no, I'm sorry. I moved ahead of myself here. I just moved the page ahead. We have the Temple Street Upgrades Phase 2 project construction tender award, and I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder before we begin the discussion. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. All right, Mr. Figueroa, would you please give us the background on this very expensive and very important project? Thank you.
If I may, Your Worship, before Council is the Temple Street Upgrades Phase 2 project, their construction tender award. It represents the upgrade work for Temple Street from Chinook to Bay Avenue to bring it to a modified local standard similar to Phase 1. The Temple Street link will provide an alternative route parallel to Highway 19A, which should further strengthen the walking, cycling network and allow all forms of pedestrians to access amenities in a safe and healthy manner. In the tender process, we had 4 competitive bids that were received. The lowest bid is $2,993,141 plus tax from Napit Industries, and this bid is within 2.6% of the engineer's cost estimate. Staff reviewed the bids and concluded that the bids were competitive and indicate the lowest bid represents the best current market value of the work. We reviewed, obviously, the bids with Coors and Associates and concluded that the bid ended up being about 2.6% higher than the engineer's cost estimate, but it doesn't raise any significant concerns given the total value of the project. And we feel that it represents good market value. The financial section, I'm sure you noticed, of the report, it outlines the monies required as well as the current budgets available. The total Phase 2 project cost is not within the available 2015 budget, and the overall shortfall is totaling $423,176. Staff is requesting authorization from Council to fund the shortfall from the general fund accumulated surplus. The difference, the biggest factor in causing that shortfall is a scope change that occurred during the design process. So from between budgeting and detailed design. Concurrent with that, we had the storm master plan update, and a new model was being created based on the latest OCP and climate change. As a result of that work, it was determined that more storm sewers would need to be replaced than previously predicted from the previous storm model. So storm sewers were added. This made up the majority of the shortfall. Then the recommendations are as per the report.
Questions for Mr. Figuera, Mr. Councillor Greer, and then Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was wondering about the shortfall. You did explain it somewhat. Was this a problem with our budgeting, or was this an overrun of the tender?
If I may, Your Worship, the shortfall can be, the majority of it can be explained by a change in scope, and it was directly as a result of the concurrent storm master plan update and the model that was occurring. In terms of the budget, when it was originally done, it was done before that, so it would have been underestimating in a few areas. One other thing that also pushed it was we went to, in terms of the roadworks, we went to LED lighting. In the short term, LED lighting to do the installation is more expensive. And however, in the long term, with the energy savings, we had our engineers do a fair bit of in-depth analysis to make us understand that basically to go to LED lights on Temple, because of the energy savings you would have at the end of the day, it's a wash in terms of whether to use the traditional lighting, the sodium lighting, or go to the LED. We wanted this is our first showcase piece in terms of our LED lighting. By going to LED lighting at the end of the day, because of the energy savings, it's not going to cost us any more at the end of the day. There's a few other aspects like that feed into the.
Just one other question. When we do these tenders, do we have a firm completion date, and do we have a percentage for overruns, budget overruns? Maybe you can answer that first.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, by budget overruns, do you mean at the end of the day construction cost overruns?
Yeah, when the job's completed, we find we owe another $100,000 or whatever.
Well, we do have contingency amounts built into the bid prices, and we guard those. Quite heavily. An example of that would be Phase 1, Temple. We never used any of the contingency out of that one, and we managed to bring that in it was around $400,000 less than we were approved So that project was actually, and it was because we never touched the contingency on that one. So we do our best to guard that and make sure that the contractor is accountable, and unless we get significant indication that we agree with in terms of digging into that contingency, we will not release that. So we'll use the same prudence on this particular project here.
So the developers, they don't know what the contingency fund is. You don't tell them that we have a 10%, 15%?
If I may, Your Worship, the contingency amount is identified in the contract. However, when we create our purchase orders, we break it out, and they can only access it if we do a change order on the particular PO. So we have control over the use of that money. It cannot be accessed unless the city agrees through a change order process that they can access it.
Sitting on council, it's hard for us. We know what the budget, in this case, we know what the budgeting is for it and what the contract calls for it, but we lose track by the time the job is done and by the time the bills are put in, whether in fact it's cost us more money. And it seems to me that we build in these contingency funds, and I don't believe we should. Good business practice, I don't think does, especially when the contractor knows what it is.
Can I have Mr. Manson, he's got his hand up, interject at this time?
If I may, Your Worship, with regards to contracts, they're essentially a fixed price contract. We've asked the contractor to do specific things. The contract for those specific things is fixed. A contingency is put in place for unforeseen things that neither the city nor the contractor foresaw, to allow us to deal with those items as they come up, rather than to stop everything, re-tender out a portion of it to move forward. As Mr. Ferreira has said, those funds are not accessed unless there is a very specific reason. It's not a case of the contractor getting to do a 10 or 20% or whatever cost overrun. It is a fixed price contract. The only time the contingencies are dipped into is if something totally unexpected comes along, at which point there is negotiations between staff and the contractor to allow for that. If there's anything over and above the contingent amount, then yes, in fact, that would come back to council.
Thank you. We were just talking about completion date.
My apologies, I forgot about that portion of the question. In the contract, it states that upon award, that the contractor has to start within 3 weeks, and then you've got a total of 270 days to complete the project from that date.
Thank you, Worship. So my question is, there were issues in Phase 1 on Temple Street with some of the residents down there who felt that they weren't being heard, and so they were asking, what could be done, or they were requesting, a slight change of some sort or another, but didn't feel that they were being really heard by the city. So my question is, in Phase 2, are you aware of which residents may or may not be impacted by this? And have you had a conversation with them? And are they good with whatever it is that we're going to be doing? Has that all been seen to, so council won't be getting, letters or complaints? Or has that all been addressed before you start this time?
If I may, Your Worship, I'm aware of obviously some of the residents on Phase 1 that had issues with the project. We, in that case, many of those residents, as far as I've seen and my staff have seen in completing the project, they're quite happy. There are some that aren't. That's the way that goes. But there are a number of the ones that had some issues are now quite happy with the result there. But having said that, we have invested some money, and we've already contacted the majority of the residents. On phase 2, we've already discussed the impact on their properties. We've put more money into going ahead of time with arborists to completely understand the impact of the work on the existing landscaping that's there. As we did in phase 1, our efforts are to certainly try to save any of the significant trees that we can, to work with the contractor to make sure that they understand that they are to work with the arborist. We have special line items in the contract that identify, and on the drawings that identify, specific areas that are priced differently in terms of the boulevard work. And those are areas that were identified by our arborist and our staff as sensitive areas. So we've gone ahead and actually have those on the drawings, and we've spoken to the people that front those particular zones. So we're doing a lot more proactive things and investing some more money in that, and that's reflected a little bit in the overage as well, the shortfall. We're putting a little bit more money and effort into that.
Thank you, Worship. So just one more question. So again, in phase 1, there were some issues with the street lights. And so there were some residents who felt that there were, 2, 3 lights on a corner and they were all shining right into their house. So they really were never going to have a dark home again unless they had blackout curtains up all over. So have you, and as far as I know, that was not mitigated. So moving forward now, are you keeping that in mind as you're thinking about where you're going to be placing the lights and where things are going to be and how that impacts the residents who are living in the home? Because there's nothing they can do about a street light when it's shining into their house. But if the street light is placed in such a way that it doesn't impact them, are you looking at that? Are you considering that? And if so, or if you can't change anything, are you discussing that with the residents so they know it's coming?
If I may, Your Worship, through Councillor Salter, we are being proactive and going ahead and talking to people about where the streetlights are going to be. These LED streetlights are the other advantage of LED streetlights beyond the energy savings are that they're more directed. Many people are used to seeing the standard sodium lights, and there's a reason why the LED lights cost more initially. We need more of them because they're more directed, and we need more of them to cover the same area. They also have shielding on the inside, so that most of the array goes out onto the road or onto the sidewalk, and try to minimize. We installed those in phase 1 as well. We have gone ahead and will continue to do so during construction to ensure that the placement of the street lights. There was a few situations in phase 1 where we had to, in discussions with the homeowners, we had to move the lights a little bit, in which case we needed to reevaluate with the engineer of record to make sure that we still get the same coverage if we move those lights. It's not as simple as just moving a light, because your whole array is designed to get a minimum level of lighting. So, but we worked with residents in phase 1 to make those changes, and we did make changes, and we will continue to do that in phase 2.
Follow-up?
So it sounds like you are aware of what happened in phase 1, and you're working on ensuring that doesn't happen in phase 2. So I really appreciate that, and I think residents will too. So thank you for that.
Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple questions. My first one is 270 days, and if we award this contract tonight, we'll be looking at an August start date, which means that it'll look at an April finish, which is directly through the winter months. And I foresee probably, like Councillor Greer, an overrun on time, because we don't have control of the weather by any stretch of the imagination. And there's often some unforeseen weather conditions. We obviously didn't think that it was going to be quite so dry a summer now, so we could be expecting a very heavy waterfall in the fall, but I'm not a weatherman. So that's my one statement. Going back to the LED lighting and that, are they on timers?
If I may, Your Worship, the street lights are on light sensors. They're not on timers. So it depends
so they'll
on...
come on when it gets dark and
yes.
they'll shut off when
Right.
dawn starts.
Yeah.
Thank you. My final question is similar to other councillors. How many residents are going to be impacted by this construction? Do we know exactly how many residents in that upgrade?
If I may, Your Worship, I don't have the exact number on me, but I believe it's in the neighborhood of, I would have to check, I think it's 80 lots, something in that neighborhood.
80 lots. Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Oates?
Question. So, Councillor Salter raised a specter there. Some people may not like the location of the lights. Would that be a good example of where the contingency fund would be used?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, that is an example of where it could be used. We've been able to actually make changes and work with the contractor. We did similar changes in phase one, and we never dipped into the contingency. We were able to kind of give and take and work it out with them so that we didn't have to do that. But that's an example of we're trying to adapt after the fact, after the design, to try to alleviate some of the concerns of the public.
Any further questions? You did have a meeting in phase one. You had a meeting with all of the residents. At least all the residents were invited, and some couldn't show up. They were out of. Are you going to do the same thing? I didn't hear you say that. Are you going to do the same thing in this phase two? Have a meeting and invite all the residents to that meeting?
If I may, Your Worship, we had initially, prior to finalizing the detailed design of phase one and the preliminary design of phase two, there were 2 open houses that were done. The meetings we're talking about now with residents are one-on-one meetings with them with a set of drawings and trying to explain what the impact is going to be on their property.
Final comment from me. I noticed that in looking at the bidders, there were 4, but the high bidder out of the 4 was $600,000 over the estimate, for sake of a better word, or over the winning bid amount. When you looked at that bid, when you examined that bid, were there items there that seemed to be too high, and there was no concern that the original estimates were on the money?
If I may, Your Worship, we looked at all the, of course, we looked at all the bids, and you'll notice when we try to look for some consistency, you'll see the first 3, and even the 4th one, that kind of variability you're seeing there, even between the lowest bid and the third lowest, there's $300,000. That's market variability. It also depends on it depends on how these contractors are distributing their bid, their costs. If you look at all 4, you're looking at over $600,000 in variability there. What we're quite confident with is the first 3. For that magnitude of a project, a $3 million project, basically, to have $200,000 to $300,000 in variability, that's good. That's good. You know, we're right in there. We're confident that we're getting the right price, because one of the things that really jumps at us is the bids come, well, the lowest bid, which is not far off, at least 3 of those are fairly close together. It's 2.6% off of the engineer's estimate. We know that's a good number. And, you know, bidding this at any other time, I wouldn't expect you'd get a much better deal. it's the right number. That's just what it is. That's what it is in this market here. So.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the Director of Engineering. So, you know the four-way stop on Bay Avenue and Temple, is that going to just remain the same? Are you just going to stop at the end of Temple? Or is it going to follow through? Like, I know the works isn't on Bay Avenue, it's on Temple Street. So what's going to happen to that four-way stop?
If I may, Your Worship, that Temple is the coming south on Temple onto Bay and then to the highway. That's the traffic flow that's going to be emphasized through there. You're going to see there's a little bit of a corner cut on the property corner at that, if I remember correctly, to get a better curve in there. It emphasizes, anyways, free flow for the Temple Bay traffic. Bay Avenue east of there they'll be coming to a stop sign there. Yeah. I don't know if you call it straight, but yeah, no stop sign. Yeah.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Directed to our CAO. So this shows a budget shortfall of just over 400,000, 423,176. And that will be taken from the general fund accumulated surplus. But as we know from budget meetings, this always affects something else down the road. So do we anticipate that next year we'll have to look at some of our other projects in phase?
If I may, Your Worship, I'll probably be taking some words out of the Director of Finance's mouth. Looking at the reserves out over the next 5 or 6 years, we're fine. When you get beyond the 5 or 6, that's when things begin to be a little bit of concern. But that's far enough off that there's plenty of time in between now and then for adjustments to be made to accommodate it. So we're not worried.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Mr. Figueroa, once again, land exchange, portions of 1209 Island Highway East and 1220 Island Highway East. Can I have a mover and a seconder for them? Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Salter. Okay. Mr. Figueroa, once again, please, if you would.
If I may, Your Worship, before Council, we have a report. The land exchange portions of 1209 Island Highway East and 1220 Island Highway East. The report's requesting authorization for staff to complete an equal area land exchange or essentially a lot line relocation with the Heritage Mall. Just to give you a little bit of the backgrounds there, but I'll just kind of touch on it. The city was contacted by the Heritage Mall owner, and there was some concerns, I guess, of safety concerns with access and egress from that site. After some discussion between staff and the owner, a solution was formulated that it basically ends up benefiting the city as well as the Heritage Mall site and increasing safety there. The solution is basically a property line adjustment that creates a more functional and marketable city lot, as well as providing frontage for the mall off of Northwest Bay Road. You can see, if you want to take a look at Schedules A and B, just show you essentially what we have here. Schedule A shows the city park, Rotary Peace Park, which actually is not officially a park. It's a fee simple lot, but it's segmented by the Heritage Mall site, so it's it's not a very functional, even as a park, it's not a very functional park. It's treed right now. Those shaded areas are treed, and the segment has been cleared at the Heritage Mall site, and they use it for parking. Schedule B shows the proposal. Basically, it's a land swap or a property line adjustment. So the city ends up with Lot B, which would be a much more functional, if we choose in the future to actually develop that as a park, or we could sell it if we want someday. Right now, it's not a functional park. and it would result in, you can see there, Area A at the back. That's what one of the pieces we would be handing over to the Heritage Mall site. It gives them a bit of frontage off Northwest Bay Road, and by doing that, they can actually have deliveries, and vehicle access can use the lights at Franklin Skull, which is the intersection there, and Island Highway. They can use that instead of the entrances that are located directly onto the lot off the highway, and come in the back. So benefit for them. I know a lot of people park in that parking lot that visit the museum market. They use that parking lot, and the owner allows them to do that. As far as I know, there's no expense to do that, and it will continue to do that. So we end up with a benefit there too. So the recommendation basically is to ask for council's approval to make that happen. In terms of finances, in discussions, in staff's discussions with the Heritage Mall, it was indicated that staff would bring forward to council that we would cover the cost of doing the actual paperwork. Seeing as how we're getting a benefit out of this, A, that we got a more functional, more valuable piece of property out of it, and B, it increases the safety through there, that the city would pay for that. If we got into a situation where we're actually talking about monetary negotiations with them and doing appraisals and stuff, in my estimation, the city would end up spending $7,000-8,000 on our side. The Heritage Mall owner would end up spending similar amount on their side. So for what? I think it's prudent to keep this simple, recognize the benefit to the city, and pay for the legal expense. We have the money to do it in our budget. So the recommendation is as per the report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Figuera? Councillor Salter, Councillor Patterson, and Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. So my question is it's just that I can't picture it. I know where we're talking about. I know the property we're talking about, but I'm trying to picture. I'm assuming a road through from the Heritage Mall through to the Northwest Bay Road where the lights are, and so then there would be a portion of that. I'm guessing if you're driving towards Northwest Bay, so I'm thinking to the right would be what the city would still own, or the city would own, and then to the left would be what we're giving to the Heritage Mall. Is that the picture? And is that it? There'll be a road through there?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Salter, what we would end up with, if you look at Schedule B, there's a shaded area marked B, but basically there's a parallel line with, I should apologize, the name of the road isn't there. It's Franklin Skull between the city lot and the museum property. It's Franklin Skull. So the property fronting Franklin Skull is what the city would end up with. As part of Heritage Mall's access improvements, they would be entirely responsible for, after this process occurred, to submit an access permit off of Northwest Bay Road. They would be totally responsible for all the construction costs of any access off of that property. Basically, the city involvement is only in going through is processing the access permit. There's no cost to the city after this property exchange. I'm not sure if I answered that.
And so basically the city would own to the right from the highway to that piece on the right if you're looking towards the Northwest Bay Road. Is that correct?
If I may, Your Worship, if you were standing in the intersection of Franklin Skull and Island Highway looking towards Northwest Bay Road, the city property would be on your left-hand side and the museum would be on your right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, I'm look directionally to move things around on my. I guess my question, or the Rotary Peace Park, how this piece of property or whatever, how did it get to be called that? Because that's not where the Rotary Peace Park is by any stretch of the imagination. It's got two other buildings in between it, the museum and the Visitor Information Center. So I guess I just need a little bit of clarification, please, Mr. CEO.
If I may, Your Worship, once upon a time they were all connected together, so it just kind of flowed from one to the next to the next. I know.
Okay, I'm just finding a hard time wrapping my.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Figuera. I can appreciate that this would be a benefit to the city, and I can certainly see it being a benefit to the property at the Heritage Mall. I'm still a little bit curious about as to why we would pick up all the costs here. And the reason for this is it just seems to really significantly benefit the owner. And I note that that lot at the end is also for sale. I imagine that will improve the value of the lot and also the sellability. And so I'm just wondering if something in the middle, such as sharing the cost, was also considered. And that's what I'm wondering.
Mr. Figuera.
If I may, Your Worship, we did consider that, and in doing so, I think if we got to that level of negotiation, we would certainly need to do a property value assessment, see what the increase in value is on our property, see what the increase in value is in the Heritage Mall to completely understand it. If you're going to go there, you pretty much have to do that. Now, we recently completed a property assessment on a different lot, but anyways, the value of that, to get that done, was $5,000 roughly. So if we were going to do that, say we share the legal fees, say it's right now it totals $4,850. So if we share the legal fees, you're looking at $2,425. We would have to do a property assessment on that. Say it's $5,000 for us. So now we're spending $7,400, and then I'm sure the Heritage Mall people, if we're doing a property assessment on ours, they're going to do one on theirs, so they'll spend another $5,000 there. At the end of the day, this was seen as the simplest way to do it, the least expense for the taxpayer, and that's kind of how we arrived at that.
Follow up, Councillor Beal.
I just want to thank you very much for that clarification. That really helps.
Thank you, Your Worship. This reconfiguration of the land, if it were to be approved, would it result in an increase in maintenance costs for the city, a reduction in maintenance costs for the city, or no change in maintenance costs for the city?
If I may, Your Worship, at the moment there is minimal expense for the city to maintain that. We're not using it for anything. The original configuration didn't really support any kind of use. At this time, as far as I understand, operationally, there is no intention to develop that into anything. However, the opportunity was never there either, given the configuration of it. Down the road, depending upon resources, we could decide to develop that either as a park or not. We could decide to sell it at some point. Right now, it's a little bit up in the air. We just never had the opportunity before, so I'm not sure if that gets to the point.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. So just to clarify, this is parkland currently? Is it designated? Because I have it as a fee simple lot.
If I may, Your Worship, it shows up on our maps as a park. However, if we do a legal investigation, it turns out it's a fee simple lot.
Okay.
It does not have park designation.
So, be the bad guy and everything. So technically, it could be paved and it could be it could be a parking.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, it was the question that it may be. It could be paved someday.
It could be paved and put as parking, because in that area is where the museum is located and the visitor information. And I do know that there's some traffic challenges and everything there with some of the markets and some of the summer traffic with motorhomes and such, and parking on the sides of the road on Northwest Bay, and a little bit on Franklin's Gulf. So I guess that's my question.
I suppose it's possible. I want to check with our planning staff to make sure that all the zoning's there. But there are other parking areas in that area, but definitively right now I can't really say. I'd have to check with our planning department to see if that would be a possibility or if there'd need to be a rezoning to do that.
So, Ms. Ross, do I have a mover and a seconder? I don't believe I do. Yes, I do have a mover and a seconder. Understand to be corrected. All right. Any further questions? My guide here is telling me that I didn't have a mover and a seconder, and I did. Okay. We're going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed?
I moved.
That's carried. Yeah.
You second?
So,
You seconded.
these long discussions, I lose track. Thank you, Councillor Powell, for getting me into trouble. Our next report is the check signing authorization policy number 6-11. Can I have a mover and a seconder for those three recommendations? Moved by Councillor Salters, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mr. Butterworth, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the check signing authorization policy?
Thank you, Your Worship. The city's check signing policy was last updated in 2007. Since then, there's been many developments in EFTs, or electronic fund payments, and the city has been impacted by this recently as well, with the school tax mandating some very large EFTs to them, which we formerly used to pay by check. We also have wire transfers to invest our surplus cash, and our current policy doesn't cover either EFTs or the wire transfers that we're doing. So some of the changes from our current policy that have been incorporated into Appendix A attached are approval for EFTs, non-payroll. If they're 5,000 and under, we just need one signature from the appointed list that's listed on the policy. And 5,000 to 50,000, we would have two signatures, two appointed signatures, or one elected and one appointed. And for 50,000 and over, two signatures, one elected and one appointed. For payroll EFTs, it's a little different. We've been doing payroll by EFT for at least 10 years, and our current payroll is around 130,000, and we've always just had one signature. It's never been formalized in a policy on what we should be doing with that, so I added it in as a separate item. I don't think there's anything wrong with our current procedure of just having one signature. It is to try and get an elected official to approve it before we send it. Usually sometimes we're on a really tight deadline and someone would have to be here specifically at a certain time to do that. So I think we've got sufficient internal controls with it as it is for one signature from the appointed list. And if the payroll does go over 150,000, which would be an odd case, then it would require two signatures just to verify why the increase is there for over 150,000. I also added in for wire transfers, and essentially this is just for investments. Right now we have a template set up with our TD Bank where I can only send wire transfers to two approved investment firms. Where we did have two signatures to approve them, the bank won't set that up unless they have two signatures. So I formalized that in the policy to say 2 signatures to set up a template. Once the template's set up, then I can go in and transfer money to, currently we use RBC and Raymond James, and I can transfer money back and forth to investments, take it out of our current account, which isn't earning, which is virtually earning no interest, and put it into investments where we can earn a little bit of interest and transfer back and forth. So the transfers only need myself to go online and do that, but setting up the template would require 2 signatures. So, and the recommendation is as per the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Butterworth. I just have a quick comment to clarify in my mind. When you talk about one elected, normally it's always the mayor or the deputy mayor, but it could be a member of council if the mayor or deputy mayor weren't available?
That's correct.
Is that correct? Yes. Okay, thank you. Councillor Greer. You're moving?
Yeah. No. Is it?
It's been moved.
Oh, sorry.
You and Councillor Powell are having a...
We're going to sleep.
Getting me worried here, are you? Okay, any questions for Mr. Butterworth? Fairly straightforward. Okay, seeing no questions, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that is carried. Okay. We're moving on to reports. Mrs. The mayor is going to get his gavel out if this continues. Okay. I had never had the gavel out yet, but there may be a first time. Mrs. Tardif, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding Canada 150-year mural mosaic? And before I do, I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Oates. Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Tardif, you're on.
Thank you, Your Worship. The City of Parksville was approached by the Canada 150 Mural Mosaic Project to be one of 150 towns and cities across Canada to participate in the Canada 150 Mural Program, which is intended to recognize Canada's 150th birthday in 2017. The mural would be made up of 400 to 450 individual 4 by 4 inch tiles, each painted by a member of the community. When finished, the mural will be 8 feet by 8 feet and mounted permanently in our community, hopefully here in the PCTC with approval from VIU and the school district. A team of mosaic artists who are traveling across Canada will work with us to create an appropriate design for Parksville, which will also fit with the overall mural theme for the rest of Canada. Painting of the tiles would happen over 2, maybe 3 days, and I see these days as also being used as an opportunity to celebrate our community. We will approach community groups and organizations to help with promotion of the project, and the report suggests selling 400 tiles at $20 each to recoup $8,000, leaving a cost of the project to the city of $3,500. This mural project would provide an opportunity for our citizens to participate in Canada's 150th anniversary and would also provide a Canada 150 legacy in Parksville for years to come. The report recommendations are as per Council's agenda.
Okay, before I ask for questions, I just want to point out on page 49 that any skill level is okay, so that's really important for me to know that. Questions, Councillor Oates, Councillor Salter, and Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to our communications officer. The figure of $20 per tile, how did we come up with that? Is that what's being charged in other jurisdictions?
No, not that I'm aware of. It was a way to recoup some of the expenses, and it was a nice round number.
Councillor Salter and then Councillor Patterson. Councillor Beale, did you have your hand up? Okay, Councillor Beale after Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. I like this idea. I like the community being involved in something like this, and it's a project that's, long-lasting. I don't like the $20 fee, and that's because I know that there are members of our community who don't have a $20 extra. Maybe their children want to be involved in this, or maybe they do, whatever, and they just don't have the money. And I don't know that charging people money so that they can participate in something so significant is something that we should be doing. That's my thought. I just think to be able to, that everyone can be engaged and everyone gets the opportunity to either engage or not engage, I don't think there should be a charge.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll go to the other L word and say that I love this project. I love tying things in together. I love being able to do something in the community, and I know that being involved in different service organizations and everything, that these are gonna go fast, and I want 4. Can I have 4? She's not giving me an answer. Like I said, I believe that our service clubs and arts councils like the MAC and other organizations are going to snap these up and give opportunities to people that may not have the funds and everything. So I'm very, very supportive.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Worship. I would also like to add that I very much support this project. I think it's a lovely idea, and I think it's quite an honor that we were invited, as there are only a limited number of 150 communities that were invited. At first, much like Councillor Salter, I didn't really like the idea about charging. That being said, thinking about it further, it's not like everyone in the community is going to pay these. So different organizations, different schools, et cetera, will have an opportunity to take part, and then it's up to them as to what they decide and how they do that. I think about schools, and all the schools have an active pack. I think that if a school has 1 tile or a couple of tiles, I think that they could probably come up with the money for that, and similarly for organizations. And perhaps we could even have something like make a donation so that someone else can take part. So I think that there would be ways to address that concern, and I do appreciate the work that Tardif has put into this, and with the idea of thinking that a $20 is a fairly nominal charge, and yet it does reduce the cost for the city. And finally, I love that there will be a legacy and that it will be something that we can enjoy for years to come. So thank you for putting this together.
When you talk about in the executive summary, you say that the city has been approached to participate in the project, where the city would work with the community to create a mural to be located in Parksville. So the community, to contribute to the mural, you don't have to be a citizen of Parksville. You could be in the community, which is even
That's
greater.
what I was thinking, that it would be open to the region.
Okay. Good. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Salt.
I just want to say one more thing with regard to the cost. I know that there are people in the community who don't have $20. It's great that it's being offered out to groups like the MAC and to the schools and so on who do have the money. And fair enough, they should be involved. But I also think that citizens, individuals, parents, families, or their children should also be involved in this. And so we're spending $3 million on a Temple Street upgrade. This is $4,000 for something that I think is really fun, and I think it's something that the community could really be, all residents could be a part of, and as I said, it's something that they can look at for a long, long time. It'll be there for a long time for them. So something, if a child were to do one of the tiles, then they're 18 and they come back. I just think that's awesome. But I do think that the charge will impact people who can't afford it.
Okay, I believe that that if somebody wants to participate and can't afford it, I'm sure somebody out there will be doing some subsidizing, I'm pretty sure, because of the nature of the project. It's such a great project. Okay, no further comments. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, we now move on to the draft solid fuel appliance regulation bylaw. And before I introduce Mrs. Comas, can I have a mover and a seconder for the bylaw? Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Greer. Okay. Mrs. Comas. over to you.
Yes, Your Worship. This is something that staff have been working on for some time. Council had requested staff explore options for dealing with smoke from solid fuel burning appliances. The city has a nuisance abatement bylaw, which staff are recommending be the manner in which smoke complaints be dealt with, but that in order to ensure that the appliances that are used in Parksville are the most energy efficient possible and the most clean burning as possible, that a solid fuel appliance regulation bylaw be enacted to govern the installation of solid fuel appliances to ensure they meet CSA and EPA standards. And the recommendations are as per the council agenda.
Okay, questions for Mrs. Comas? Seeing none, we're going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Let's do that again. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Once again, Mrs. Comas, unsightly properties, 421 Morrison Avenue and 119, 139, 161, and 173 Molliette Street. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mrs. Comas, would you please give us the background?
Yes, Your Worship. We are back again with these 5 properties that have been the source of unsightly complaints for the last 5 years. And it seems that we find ourselves in this position on a regular basis where we have certain properties in town that continually violate the property maintenance bylaw, and we are forced to come to council and ask for your indulgence in directing that the properties be cleaned up, and if the properties are not cleaned, authorizing us to either arrange for cleanup or conduct the cleanup with city crews, and the cost will be applied to the property taxes for those properties at the end of the year if the bill is unpaid.
Thank you. And looking at the properties in the pictures, somebody better not flick a cigarette, but Councillor Oates.
Yes, not one of my favorite chores to do on council, but an absolutely necessary chore. I went by that property earlier today. There was a contractor there cleaning it up. I drove by there on my way into council tonight, and there's a nice couch sitting there and a mattress on the property. So it certainly needs to be cleaned up. It's unfortunate that we have to be, it has to get to that state of disrepair before it's done, but I certainly will put some teeth to our bylaw officers and allow them to complete this task, and hopefully they get the message eventually. We may need to start thinking about some sort of escalated fine system for repeat offenders. If somebody is causing us to do this for 6 or 7 or 8 years in a row, maybe we should be sending a stronger message down the road.
Mrs. Comas and I have had that discussion already. Great minds think alike. Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. I live in this area 2-3 blocks away from my home, so I saw the same vehicle and that today, and I was hoping that there was cleanup being done, but I didn't get back to see it. So Councillor Oates is saying that this is another area that we have transient people that kind of hide out in the back corner and that. So I really do believe that it needs to be cleaned up for multiple reasons, and that we did a walkabout not too long ago in the downtown core and saw, hiding in little furniture places and that in the area. So I'm fully supportive, and I think that, like Councillor Oates has said, that some of our bylaws need to have a little bit of teeth or mulching or lawn mowing and that put to them. Thank you.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I note in the report that letters have been sent to the owner in the past, and that also this has happened over a number of years. So I'm just curious. I take it this request has come to council on previous occasions over the years, and we've had to go through this every time. Is that correct? Okay. And so at the end of the day, things are cleaned up by the owner, but only after. Okay. Thank you.
No further questions. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. I believe this is the final report from Mr. Manson regarding the 2014 annual municipal report. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mr. Manson, please give us the background on this issue.
Thank you, Your Worship. The community charter requires that local governments must prepare and make available for the public an annual report which includes such things as the audited financial statements, a statement of permissive tax exemptions, a report outlining annual services and operations, a statement outlining council strategic focus and objectives, amongst several other things. I'm not going to go into the specific details, as the report is relatively self-explanatory and it's presented for council and the public's information.
Okay, any questions for, we've all received copies. We've had them now for a couple of weeks, yeah. Any questions for Mr. Manson? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. We have some bylaws this evening. And the first, I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation of the solid fuel appliance regulation bylaw 2015, number 1516. I have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Greer, Councillor Salter. Any questions? Any comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next is the bylaw offense notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2015, number 1486.4. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Greer. Any comments? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. We have two bylaws for final adoption. The Water Service System Amendment Bylaw 2015, number 1320.25, and Bylaw Offense Notice Enforcement Amendment number 2015, number 1486.3. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Greer. All those in favor? Oh, you have a comment? I'm sorry. Okay, I'll have a comment first, and then we'll call the vote.
Thank you, Worship. I wasn't able to attend the meeting where this was brought forward and the discussion happened. I think that we are charging way too little for people who are not following this bylaw. I think that we should raise it to at least $500 for people who are watering contrary to the conservation levels. I've received two incidents over the weekend from different people, emails about who do I report to. Somebody's washing their car, somebody's watering their lawn, and I think that we have to make it high enough to make it serious enough so people stop watering. It seems to me that people in this community, not everybody, think this is a game. Like, let's not get caught. And so I think $100 is way too low, and I think I wanted $1,000, and then I got talked into $500. So I think people out there should be grateful for that. So I do not support this as it stands because I think it's way too little. It's a joke.
Before I go to Councillor Oates, Mrs. Comas and I had a similar discussion. Mrs. Comas, would you care to comment on where staff came up with $100?
Yes, Your Worship. We looked at some other communities that are levying fines, and we looked at what we have consistently levied in terms of fines and a range of fines, and actually compared to some of our other fines, $100 for the first offense is quite stringent. Our process is still to educate first and to fine second, but we are getting quite a few calls with respect to people reporting, neighbors and people, and we have some properties that the Water Patrol are keeping an eye on because their lawns are incredibly green for this time of year if they're not watering. And you know, it usually takes about a week for properties to start to show the effects of stopping watering, so we're monitoring those properties during the time that since the level 4 came in to see whether or not the level 4 has convinced people to stop watering. So we are, for the most part, working on education first and penalties second. If council wishes to increase the fine levels, we can certainly do that. What would happen is we would have to rescind third reading. We would have to then amend the bylaw and give it third reading as amended, and it wouldn't come back for final adoption until August 5th, in which case we wouldn't be able to actually levy any fines or tickets until August 6th. So just so you know what that process is.
Let Councillor Powell have a follow-up, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so part of what happens, and I've heard this over and over again with different bylaws that we have, and quite frankly, I think that our enforcing our bylaws is quite a joke in this community. It's always people come and they say, well, we're going to get the warning, we're going to get this. For instance, the one we just passed for the unsightly premises. How many years has that been going on? How many times have they paid a fine? How many, like, when do we say enough? This is really serious. We're at stage 4 watering across all of Vancouver Island. This isn't, oh, let's cheat and use more water than we should. This is a serious consequence if we don't have enough water. If there's a fire, we're going to be in trouble. So I think that we need to get serious and we need to level the fine, because I think that's the only thing that people are going to understand is when it hits them in the pocket.
Well, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell, we do have the ability under the bylaw to levy a fine for every day the person is in contravention. So it's not just a matter of one fine. If they don't get the message after the first fine, then we fine them again and again and again until they get the message and it starts to hurt. With respect to things like unsightly properties and the enforcement of our bylaws, the reason that we go through the process that we do with unsightlies and having it come to council is because we have a statutory process under the community charter that we have to follow, because we are required by law to treat people with fairness, and as a result there are requirements put in place that require this. In essence, is a show cause hearing for the people who have an unsightly property, but they just don't bother to come. Now, when we brought in the fines for unsightly premises, we started fining people, and in the first year the fine was $100, and in the first year, like for instance, we have an unsightly premises that we deal with every year that is 10 properties. So we issued one fine for the 10 properties thinking, okay, now that they're getting fined, they'll see the light. And they didn't, and so the following year we fined them for each one of the properties. It's a $1,000 bill. They still didn't clean it up, and last year we billed them $20,000 for the equipment and work that it took to clean up the property. And this year they're back with another unsightly premises. So they paid $21,000 last year to clean up a piece of property, and they paid the bill without any problem, and they're unsightly again. So there are some people who just choose to pay, and we just don't have the ability beyond our legislated authority to do more.
Thank you, Worship. So if we charge them $500, then that would be $1,000 a day instead of $200 in 2 days. You see what I'm saying? And I think that would be more of an incentive. I think $100 is way too cheap. And I want to say, just so everybody's clear, I wasn't taking a shot at the bylaw officers. It's just that our hands seem to be tied, because we get complaints about dogs on the beach. We get complaints about backyard burning. We get complaints about watering on the weekends. And people understand that they can do that on the weekends because we don't have a bylaw officer. And so I think in the future we need to have a really good look at staffing levels as far as bylaw officers are concerned. And I can't believe I'm saying that. Anyways, just saying, I think a $500 fine would be way more appropriate than $100, because once that water's gone, it's gone.
Mr. Manson. Well, in some ways, I see where Councillor Powell is coming from, and it's hard to believe, given the weather that we've had for the last 2.5, 3 months, that people can't recognize that you have to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I find it totally unthinkable that somebody would be watering their lawns in this particular time that we're suffering through, but we are. I'm going to support the recommendation of staff, because I think that as Mrs. Comas and I have had a number of discussions, our offices are adjacent to one another, and if somebody gets caught for watering day after day after day, they're going to suffer the $100 fine per day or per time. So I can live with that in the beginning. Go ahead, Mrs. Comas.
Your Worship, if Council does wish to increase the fine amount, we could pass this bylaw and start with a $100 fine, and then Council could direct staff to come forward with another amendment bylaw to increase the fine. Now, it would be the August 20th Council meeting before that higher fine came in, but or even a graduated fine would come in, but we could start with this and move forward with a different fine structure over the next month, if you so wish.
Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, Councillor Powell's started a discussion I think that Council should pursue when you get into the budget deliberations for 2016 with regards to bylaw compliance. And I would suggest that at the same time, that's when you should maybe review all of the fines in conjunction with the overall discussion of bylaw compliance.
Okay. Councillor Greer, you had a comment or question?
Well, I liked Mrs. Comas' idea of passing this, getting it up and running, and then we can do something different at a later date. Just to put it off altogether, I think we should go ahead with this, but we should look at it. And I agree with you that fines should be higher, but I think we should deal with this tonight and then make a move later to increase the fines.
I apologize. Councillor Oates, I thought you had...
That's what the suggestion I was going to make, that we move ahead with this tonight, put it on our agenda for, because I think we need to start getting the fines out there right away, and we put it on our agenda to revisit this in the very near future. We can probably learn a lesson from what happens over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then after that, then we can reevaluate whether or not we need to increase the fines. It speaks to a bigger issue, which is the bylaw issue.
Councillor Powell, are you going to make a motion?
I would actually support that. We
You want to make that
motion?
Do
I need to make a motion? Yeah, the motion is on the floor.
Okay.
I can't make it.
All right. Well, we'll vote on that motion. Do you want to talk about this particular motion that's on the floor? Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to say that I also agree with carrying on with the $100 fine at this time. And I do think that we need to review, once this is in place and once we're actually, once it's impacting residents who are not complying, and then make a decision after that, because they may actually start to comply when it's starting to cost. And I think that's a valuable and a sensible way of addressing this, rather than just putting a fine up because we're pretty sure they won't. We don't know at this point. We need to know first.
Councillor Patterson, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I'm going to echo around the room that putting this in place and then at a higher amount. But unfortunately, and I wasn't going to, because I'd already had a slight discussion with our CAO, and I know that it's going to be looked at. I absolutely know that, because we have amazing staff. But I had to comment that we're not always compliant, and that we have sprinklers that are on roads, and I showed a couple pictures, and that of our watering that's not on our grassway, and that we're wasting water. And I absolutely know that it will be looked after, but it had to be said, because what we're doing affects residents, and sometimes they just don't know. But we do. And I really dislike having the comments thrown back that the city is not compliant, and we are. We are very, very, very much so compliant, and if we aren't, then we fix it. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Mrs. Gomez, I have one more question. When we start fining, unfortunately, if we have to fine, that's going to come to council with names and addresses? No, we can't do that? Oh, too bad. We could shame people.
No, Your Worship, we will, bylaw enforcement will be levying the fines, and it'll be a ticket like every other, whether it's a parking ticket or any other kind of infraction. It'll be a water ticket. Councillor Oates.
No, you're going to have to keep your stock in your basement. We're not going to put people into stocks. I just wanted. I've had a couple of discussions with both our communications officer and our director of operations, and I think it's important to recognize the reduction in water consumption that our citizens have taken upon themselves because of our request to reduce the amount of water that they've used. Now, I spoke with the CAO earlier tonight about this, and he said that we initially, it looked like it was about a 30% increase, and it's starting to creep back up a little bit. There was a 30% decrease in the amount of water consumption there. People were taking it seriously, and it's starting to creep back up again. So this is another opportunity for us to show to people that we're serious about this. These are. It's incredible that we have to be having this type of discussion, but it's important that it's done, and so let's do it.
Yeah, you're correct. It's totally incredible in this type of climate that we're suffering through. That anyway, I guess it is what it is, unfortunately. Any further discussion on this? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, moving on to new business. Does any member of council have any new business? I just have one quick item I wanted to get out of the way. At the RDN board meeting on last Tuesday night, I've been advised, not the board meeting, this Transit Select Committee meeting, which I'm a member, smaller bus is coming to Parksville. The big buses are going to become less and less obvious in Parksville. It's going to be a smaller bus. I think it's a 20 to 26 passenger bus. And I'm going to be asking the RDN staff to come and give us a bit of a presentation, because my expectation, when I've been asking for a smaller bus for a number of years now, a couple of years anyway, I was hoping that with a smaller bus, maybe the smaller bus could make greater inroads within the city of Parksville, and then take people down to where the 88 or the 90 is going to go on to a central location, which is going to go on to Nanaimo. So anyway, I just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that. It's not until September, so we'll try to get something going in the month of August, have a bit of a discussion. So members of council with new business. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of items. I spent quite a bit of time at the beach on Sunday, but anyways, the shower has been taken away, or it's not functional outside of the washrooms, and there's a huge demand for that when people come out of the salt water and they have to shower, and we don't have any showers in the change rooms, so I'm hoping that that's being back installed sometime, because it's still there.
If I may, Your Worship, before council tonight, I was down in the community park and it was up and operating.
Oh, it is. Today they put it in, eh? Because it wasn't in operation yesterday.
In between
Okay.
work and the council
That's good
meeting,
news.
it was up and operating.
The other comment I had, I talked to you about the trailer behind the curling club, and you said it was looked after, and it was still there as of last night as well.
We have given the individual involved at least one ticket. We're continuing to monitor. I have an email from one of the RCMP constables that he will be attending the park again tonight, and if the van is still there, the person will be ticketed again. Every time it is,
Can we not remove them?
Every time it is, it's a $100 fine for him.
But here again, obviously, he must have some. He's saving so much money there with his hydro plugged into the arena. Can we not just put them out of there. I mean, I don't understand why we go on and on with these things. They're illegally parked. Can we do something more than just a $100 fine?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Greer, that's what the bylaws allow us to do right now, and that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question in regards to your RDN meeting. And thank you for presenting on that. Was that the meeting that you had a presentation about illegal dumping as well?
Mrs. Comas, can you help me on that?
No?
It's news. I haven't heard anything.
I'll ask you about it after.
Any other new business? Councillor Oates.
Just a couple. I'm just going to comment on your busing comment there. I stopped by City Hall earlier today, and there was a couple of people on bicycles there who approached me who didn't speak very good English. I think they were probably of German descent, but they were looking for the bus stop. They had their bicycles, and they wanted to get to the 90 to get to Nanaimo. So just a comment that service is a valued service, and it it promotes our community in ways with people that we probably don't even know. But on a totally different thing, I have a motion I'd like to make. I move that council support the infrastructure planning grant application by the City of Parksville for an integrated stormwater management plan. And a second, I'll speak to it. Yeah, this grant application is due to 31st of July 2015. It's a funding application to the Ministry of Community and Sport and Cultural Development. It will be for $10,000 to support the cost of consulting services to complete an integrated stormwater management plan.
Any comments on that? That sounds like a really good plan. Councillor Beal.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what kind of stormwater management plan we have in place right now, and yeah.
It's an old one.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Beal. This has come out of we're currently finishing up the stormwater master plan right now, and there are certain elements in there that talk about ways to try to more efficiently use our stormwater. There are more high-level sorts of comments in there that we would like to detail out a little bit more in terms of making it a practical thing that we can actually start to use, even in terms of our capital projects. It identifies we need identified certain areas of the city where for instance, we talk about best management practices in terms of stormwater management, and that means generally trying to use the stormwater as a resource rather than as a waste product. And there are various ways you can do that. Our master plan speaks to that. I want it to go into more depth, though. I want it to come out of this with something that we can apply to our specifications. For instance, when we do capital upgrades, we understand the best ways that we can use stormwater as a resource. And we're talking about, using a good example is our water shortage at the moment. I mean, are there ways that we can use our water more efficiently? And directing stormwater straight to the outfall is not an efficient way. Let's save the potable water for where it's really needed, and let's see if we can tap into that stormwater stream and start using it as a resource to offset our potable water supply, and that's what it's about.
Yes, follow up.
Thank you. And as part of this grant application process, is there also addressing changes that may be needed due to climate change and the possibility of, the stronger storms, and hopefully we'll never have a repeat of that rainfall that we had on, I think it was September 8th for 20 minutes.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Beal, our updated stormwater master plan does speak to climate change issues. There are items in there that address that, and the integrated stormwater master plan would feed off of that and allow us to get more concrete applications that we can use to infiltrate the water rather than have it run straight off, have it possibly store storm water rather than just release it, maybe for use for irrigation, stuff like that. So I want to dig into that a lot more, and to do that in a storm master plan, you can't really get down to that kind of detail. If we're fortunate enough to get this grant, I will be coming back with a plan to council to let you know. We're obviously going to have to support whatever grant we get. We're going to have to support that with some additional funds to get this done. But I'll come back with a plan and let you guys know what that looks like.
Do we know how much grant is available? 10. Okay, thank you.
Something I wanted to mention earlier, but since we're talking stormwater and water, I read an official document today. British Columbians are the highest water users in all of Canada. They use over 330 liters a day. So that explains maybe what's happening. Maybe because it used to rain so much, but it doesn't rain that much anymore. Okay, call the vote on Councillor Oates' motion. We have a seconder in Councillor Powell. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Any other new business from members of council? Okay. Councillor Patterson. Turn your microphone on, please.
Sorry. I just wanted to touch on the that we received a letter on that from, and
I forgot. Thank you.
And I'd like to touch on that if any other councillors would like to, or yourself.
Yes, thank you. I folded mine by mistake. We received a letter here in the office on July the 17th from a person whose father is not very well and was a day late. He's very serious, has a very serious medical condition, is 92 years old, was a day late in paying his taxes and was penalized by the city. When this was brought to our attention, I'm wondering if there's any member of council that wants to make a move that we repay this gentleman who's a World War II veteran of 92 years of age. We repay the $110.15. Motion by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any discussion on the motion? Thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Patterson. Yes, Councillor Oates, then Councillor Beale.
I read the letter. I talked to the CAO about it there. I understand that this is one letter, but there are numerous people that have come to us with different reasons why they haven't been able to pay their property taxes in a timely manner. I certainly, I'm not going to vote against this because of the facts that are in the letter. However, I recognize that this is a very slippery slope, and if we grant an exemption to this person for their late payment of their taxes, we should be prepared to grant exemptions to future people in the future for the penalty as well. I would prefer to have a little bit more information from staff with respect to the number of people that come forward with this type of request before we voted on this, and I thought that was what was going to happen, but now I guess there's a motion in front of us. But my preference would have been to have some more information as to the scope of how many of these types of requests to come in and the various reasons therein contained.
Mr. Manson, can you answer that question tonight?
Not specifically that question. I was just going to make a clarification. The penalty is established by bylaw. You cannot waive that. The only way that you could waive it would be in order of council by the Inspector of Municipalities.
I know that. Yeah.
The only thing that you can do is provide the person with a grant and aid. So you're not, in essence, waiving the penalty. You would be giving them a grant and aid.
Does Mr. Butterworth have any indication of how many people claim reasons for being late? Is it in the hundreds? Is it at 50? Is it 20? Is it 1,000?
There's the number of people that are late is in the hundreds, but the amount of people that come in and levy various numbers of excuses and stuff, or want to try and get it refunded and appeal to myself, because usually you start with staff and they say, no, we can't do it because of the reasons Mr. Manson just said. It's actually approved by the provincial government in our community charter, so we cannot waive a penalty that's late or reverse it. Unless it happened to be our error or it was paid on time and we missed it or something, then we can reverse it. But in this case, it was paid late, so we can't reverse the penalty. And as Mr. Manson said, it could be a grant and aid. But we probably had 3 or 4 this year, and every year there's probably, it could be upwards of 10 where people, well, it's probably not even that many. It's probably 3 or 4 that get to me, and then I have to just reinforce what staff say per year.
Councillor Powell, then Councillor. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you come before these two? You're Councillor Beale?
Does that make me their elder? I came before. I do want to echo what Councillor Oates was saying, and that I would prefer to have this come at a subsequent meeting so that we would have an opportunity to get more background and to have further understanding about the process and the demands and the repercussions if are we setting precedent, or how we can do this in a humane but responsible manner for the city as well.
Councillor Powell and then Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Worship. I have 2 things. One, through you to the Director of Finance. Did they come to you first?
In this case, I did not hear about this until I saw the letter. I was actually off today, so I didn't get a chance to even review whether, when the payments were made exactly. I think it was more than 1 day late, because I believe it was paid after the weekend, which would have made it at least 2 days late. But I don't, and I haven't had a chance to review their file to see if they've paid on time as indicated in the letter and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So I just wasn't at work today.
Yeah,
so.
I would support it going back to staff too then.
Councillor Greer.
My question was just with these 2 or 3 people that you say are late that come and complain. In this case, it was supposedly 1 day late is what we get on our report here. So, is there, I'm sure there are people that are 10 days late and 20 days late, but how many people come out of the 2 or 3 that are only 1 day late? And certainly, go ahead.
Many of them are 1 day late. We have another one actually that I have to have staff look into, where they claim to have paid it on the 2nd through their bank, but our indication was that it was paid on the 3rd, so it's late. So now we have to go back and look at that. Sometimes the bank records aren't exactly accurate, or they don't give us the time when they were made, so we have to look at that, and if it was actually made on the 2nd, then it'll be considered on time. So this year I haven't had any. The last couple of years actually it's been pretty good. People have been paying on time, and a lot of people have come in and paid. They just know they just forgot their bill, forgot to pay it, and they kind of sheepishly pay their bill, and they're not happy about it, but they know they had a month to pay it, and they didn't get it. So.
Councillor Salter.
So I'm just wondering if we could table this and give staff a chance to review this, and then come back to us with a little more information, as I don't think we have enough information.
What I worry about is, given the condition of this gentleman, whether or not he's going to be around on August the 5th, but that's just my worry. Councillor Oates.
I'd like to move referral to staff for their input, please.
For reminding me of that. Yes. Do we have to vote on referral? Yeah, we have to vote on referral. I think we did. Okay. All those in favor of referral? The matter is referred. So is it by the referral, do I understand that on August the 5th we'll be in a position to get a recommendation of staff to do it or not to do it, and what circumstances it can be done?
If I may, Your Worship, we will bring a report back to Council with options for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, lastly, we're going to be moving into special business pursuant to Section 91E of the Community Charter. Council will proceed to a closed meeting to consider an item relating to land. Councillor Oates. Okay, second. We're in 5-minute break. Second. What? There was this.